Thank you.
Thank you. It has been a busy time. A couple of items that other members of council did not mention. We welcomed 3 students here last week to the Take Your Kids to Work Day, and they are sons or daughters of our staff. And I think they had a great day. The itinerary was very good, so thanks to staff for putting it together. And I know at the end of the day they were quite enthused about the activities that they had. I too was at the Conservation Awards, and I think we're going to hear a little more about that this afternoon, a little bit later. I attended the Mount Albert Legion and the Remembrance Day here as well, and thank you to all of staff who worked so very hard to make it happen. I know that there were many people that were involved with it, but Gina Casey certainly was one that had her fingers in it right from the beginning, and thank you and congratulations to our staff. The Santa Claus Parade, the one on Sunday, as we have mentioned, I've never seen as many people on the side of the road that we had. They were 2 and 3 deep, and it was really refreshing to see the number of new residents that we had as well. Councillor Persechini chairs that committee, and thanks to him for pulling together a great group of volunteers. Yesterday, I had the pleasure of attending 2 local schools to thank the grade 3 students for participating in the first ever Mayor and Council Holiday Card Art Contest. We had participants from 2 schools, Robert Munch Public School and Our Lady of Good Counsel. The art that they provided will be displayed in our council office out on our window, and the winning submissions will be used for our 2019 holiday card. So the students were really excited to get a little award, and they worked very hard to make sure that their art was very good, and it was very good. This morning we attended a fundraising announcement with the Mount Albert Lions. This was held at the Mount Albert Lions Park, and they soon will be selling bricks that will be etched with the donor's name and then laid into a path. The money raised will be directed to the Park Enhancement Project, Mount Albert Community Center. And I can tell you that before we left today, the Lions handed me a check for $25,000 to go towards the project. So they're such wonderful community partners that care about what's happening out in our park. So we thank them very much for that. The Salvation Army launched its annual holiday kettle drive, and they're always looking for volunteers. So I talked to people out in the audience. I talked to people around here, a couple of hours to take a kettle and make a difference in our community. And please visit the website if you can. Also, on Monday, the town will be kicking off their annual toy and food drive that supports many local charities and families in our community. Our community is extremely generous in the support of this annual drive, and we thank them very much for being out there. So with that, I think we will move on to the rest of our agenda today, and the next item is item D, and that's presentations. Mr. Clerk, could you introduce our presenter, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Your first presenters is Pam Strong and Bill Thompson from the Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority, making a presentation with respect to Integrated Watershed Management Specialist. Or sorry, that is what Pam's title is, but it's with regards to Healthy Water Award, Lake Simcoe Conservation Authority.
Welcome. Good to have you with us today.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the committee, staff, guests. It is my pleasure, along with Pam Strong, to be here on behalf of Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority to present the Healthy Water Award this year to the town of East Gwillimbury. The Healthy Water Award is presented on an annual basis by the Conservation Authority to individuals and groups who have completed a project that improves, supports, or protects the water quality in the Lake Simcoe watershed. This award is being presented to the town in recognition of ongoing efforts of town staff to improve winter maintenance practices. The town of East Gwillimbury's leading-edge winter maintenance practices include following a salt reduction strategy that practices anti-icing instead of de-icing by pre-treating roads 24 hours prior to an impending storm. The trick to getting bare pavement and keeping public safety is moving ahead of the storm. By using a liquid salt solution to prevent ice from forming, they were doing a lot more with a lot less. Using less salt during winter maintenance means less salt getting into Lake Simcoe. By continually following industry best practices, the town of East Gwillimbury is not only a leader in winter maintenance, but a leader in protecting the natural environment and the health of the Lake Simcoe watershed, all while keeping roads and sidewalks safe. Mike Molinari, Larry Hollett, Jeff Meggett, and their team are to be commended for their ongoing efforts in protecting Lake Simcoe's water quality, and it's my pleasure to present this award to East Gwillimbury Council and staff.
Thank you very much. I guess we will all come down. I think we'll take a picture. Thank you. Just before we come down, I just wanted to say that we are very proud of our staff. They're always innovative and they always are looking at ways of making a difference in the environment. So we're very proud of this. And we were a little surprised because we didn't know, they didn't tell us in advance. So that was wonderful to have that special feature as well. So with that, council come down and we'll accept the presentation along with our staff and they have a picture. Thank you. We'll do that. We'll go out and take the picture out in the hallway. Thank you so much for coming. We're going to find a special place to put that award for sure. Oh, very nice. That's very nice. Yes.
Close to us.
Okay, and item number 2, Mr. Clerk, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Your second presentation is a team of individuals, and they're here to present to council the Project Assist presentation, which is from the Fire Marshal's Public Fire Safety Council, Enbridge Gas Distribution, and our local emergency and community safety services team members.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, councillors, staff, and guests.
East Gwillimbury has recently received and been the recipient to receive the Project Assist grant. This grant is in partnership with Enbridge Gas Incorporated and the Fire Marshal's Public Safety Council, which supplements existing training for Ontario volunteer and composite fire departments in the community where Enbridge operates. With Project Assist, we can further advance the ability to provide fire and life safety education to the residents of East Gwillimbury. As a composite fire department with over 90 paid on call, volunteer, and full-time firefighters, we ensure that every firefighter is involved in education and prevention activities as the first two lines of defense. At this time, I would like to thank Enbridge Gas, including Steve McGilvery and Mike Avzanka, sorry, my apologies, for helping East Gwillimbury purchase the firefighting training and education materials through Project Assist and our partners, the Fire Marshal's Public Safety Council. Together, we are helping to keep East Gwillimbury safer than it was yesterday.
Good afternoon. My name's Steve McGilvery. I'm the Director of GTA East Operations. I have my colleague, Michael Sonka here, who is the local operations manager. So we really have the cream of the crop here today. So just a couple words that we wanted to share is that today the East Gwillimbury Emergency and Community Safety Services is one of 20 fire departments across Ontario that will benefit from this donation. As part of our efforts to promote natural gas safety, we're also committed to supporting the people that keep our communities safe. We provide first responders, including firefighters, with funding for everything from equipment to training, education materials, to help give the people who protect us the support that they need. On behalf of Enbridge Gas, I'd like to commend the East Gwillimbury Emergency and Community Safety Services, along with the Fire Marshal's Public Fire Safety Council, for their continued dedication to safety, and we're proud to help enhance their training efforts. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve and Mike. It's wonderful to have you here today. We are very proud of our Emergency Services Department and the work that they do to keep our community safe. And with your help, we're going to do even better. So we thank you very much for recognizing us as one of 20 in Ontario. We know we have a really good group, and now you've recognized it as well. So thank you very much.
It's truly our pleasure and privilege to support.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
Your Honor, sorry, with your indulgence, and I hate to ask, we set up a photo op in the atrium. I hate to get everybody out of their seats again, but if you don't mind, could we get a shot? Thanks.
We could do that. We'll be right back. And my apologies to those that are watching this afternoon, but when you have two presentations to recognize staff's good work, we're here to support them in every way we can. So we appreciate your indulgence as we move forward on our agenda now. Item E on our agenda is deputations. Mr. Clerk, I do not have any. Is that correct?
That is correct, Madam Mayor, and if we can just get a mover for the presentations, please, and thank you.
Moved by Councillor Persechini, seconded by Councillor Roy DeClemente. All those in favor, and that's carried. Item F, Development Services with Councillor Crone in the chair.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have a couple of, sorry, getting my agenda here. We have a couple of items on the agenda today. First one is Development Services Planning Branch Report. P2019-57, request for removal from the Register of Cultural Heritage Properties, 19051 Leslie Street. General Manager Ramuno, do you have anything to add to this?
Through you, Mr. Chair. No, with respect to the first item, the request to remove the property from the heritage list, that request was considered by the Heritage Committee back in October, and the recommendation is included in the report as recommendation 2. The recommendation was that the property continue to remain on the list until the owner comes forward with a redevelopment plan.
Thank you. Can I have a mover for this by Mr. Foster? Councillor Foster? Are there any questions for Mr. Ramuno on this? Seeing none, can we have a vote? All those in favor of accepting the report? None opposed. Motion is carried. Second item on the agenda is the Development Services Planning Branch Report. P2019-58, request to submit zoning bylaw amendment for Ballantry Homes, 474 Yonge Street, west of Yonge Street, north of Green Lane, part lot 102, concession 1 west. Mr. Ramuno, do you have anything to enlighten us on this?
To you, Mr. Chair. So this again, under the Planning Act, due to the fact that we have a new zoning bylaw that was approved back in 2018, any requests for applications for a zoning bylaw amendment application needs to be considered by council prior to staff receiving the application. So in this instance, the applicant has come forward requesting to submit an application for the purposes of permitting the second dwelling on the property, and it's a large land holding that's part of the Green Lane secondary plan. The property ownership goes from Bathurst to Yonge Street, and this is a property that does contain the Millard Heritage Home.
Thank you, Mr. Ramuno. I have a mover for this. Councillor Morton, do we have any questions? Councillor Roy DeClemente.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm normally a little bit more diplomatic in the chambers, but with respect to this particular property, we've had over the years several property standards issues. It's had a tarp for a roof for quite some months, and I think this would be a prime example of what folks who care about heritage would refer to as demolition by neglect. And this property owner, in my opinion, has had 10 years to make a change and to address that. They got 2 extensions. As far as I'm concerned, they're a custodian of a designated heritage building, and they need to step up, show it some love, show our community some respect. And when that's done, then I'm happy to consider the application.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Morton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Ramuno. The last time that a historical structure was moved, it was all taken apart piece by piece by piece, and it was not put back together again until it had laid in the snow for a good year and a half, probably, and that was the last train station that we had here in Holland Landing. And I'm really concerned about the fact that how can we guarantee that something isn't going to happen for this beautiful farmhouse? And right now, I do agree with Councillor Roy DiClemente. Until I can be assured, I'm not prepared to move forward on this recommendation either.
Thank you. Mayor Haxon.
Thank you. I have no appetite to address this at this time. Many things have been said about this piece of property and this house, and I think it's not the right time to ask us for concessions.
Any other questions, comments? I guess from my own perspective, we've been here since meeting for almost a year now as a new council, and you see these requests come in for to be taken off the list or added to the list. Rarely are they added to the list. We have this heritage list, we have this heritage committee, but I don't think we have a heritage strategy. And I would love to see us have a heritage strategy where we can look into taking concrete steps to stopping things like this happen. We have a policy and bylaws that we ask people what they can and can't do with their property. I would suggest we cast a wide net, look at what other municipalities are doing. You look at Markham, for instance, corner of Highway 48 and 16th Avenue. They have a beautiful street with heritage homes that they've moved there. It would be nice for us to consider something like that where we can showcase the heritage so that we preserve it. Because what's happening now, I don't think is working, because these homes we have, as was said earlier, demolition by neglect. Let's stop the trend of that, and let's work on a strategy. That would be my only comment going forward. Any other last chance for any questions or comments? Okay, can I have a vote on this then? All in favor? Any opposed? All right. Motion not carried. All right, and I think that is it for my reports. Do you have a comment, Councillor Roy DiClemente?
I just wanted to get on the record that we've received this report from staff. So I'll make a motion to receive.
Madam Mayor?
Thank you. I'm wondering if I could just add to it the motion that it be received and that staff meet with the applicant to discuss the outcome of the vote.
Mr. Clerk, are we treating this as a friendly amendment to the motion that was just passed?
I think it's germane.
Okay. So we'll just leave it at that. Mr. Persechini? Yeah, Councillor Persechini? We don't have to vote on it. Oh, we do?
So,
all right.
So
all right.
there's the motion that was initially put on the floor was defeated, and so the report then has no standing in our minutes. So we need to receive the
All right.
report.
Thank you for that clarification of Robert's Rules of Order. Can we vote on the motion put forward by Councillor Roy DiClemente? All in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion is carried. Mr. Romano, do you have any other comments for committee?
No, just a reminder that at 5 o'clock we have our open house, our consultants and staff at 5 to 7 down in the atrium. A brief presentation on the preliminary information related to our employment area secondary plan currently underway.
Thank you. Any other questions from committee to Mr. Romano? Seeing none, I pass the chair back to you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. We're at item G, Community Infrastructure and Environmental Services with Councillor Carruthers in the chair.
Thank you very much. We have two reports on the agenda today. The first is our fleet strategy, and I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Newman to take us through.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of council. This afternoon we have a brief presentation from Jeff Meggett, our Manager of Operations, on the fleet strategy. This is a precursor to our actual strategy report, which you'll see in an upcoming report. Jeff's been with us now for about 2.5 years, and he's brought a wealth of knowledge on fleet and fleet management, and he's one of only about 300 certified automotive fleet managers. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jeff, and we'll answer any questions following the presentation. Hopefully Jeff has got that under control. All yours, Jeff.
Thank you, Larry. Madam Mayor, members of council, I'm pleased to be here today to walk you through the opening stages of a fleet strategy. We are planning on coming back in an upcoming council meeting to outline our strategy in more detail, and it's very similar to a master plan. But given the complexity and the size of this document, we thought it'd be prudent to come and at least talk to you and show you the key elements of this plan in advance. And the next step is an overarching fleet strategy with a module-based report to discuss with council very specific focus topics. So in advance of the upcoming staff report, we really have an evolving fleet strategy. We're viewing this strategy as a 3 to 5 year working document to help guide us down the future path. The fleet right now in the town is quite large at 124 assets. For us, that's anything $5,000 in value or more, generally anything from a trailer up to a dump truck and snowplow. And this does include all the apparatus from ECSS as well. It's a very diverse fleet, and unfortunately what comes with that is varying levels of maintenance responsibilities based on different types of assets that we own. And there's a picture there of the yellow sticker. That is essentially a commercial vehicle registration sticker that's on about 1/3 of our vehicles, and that makes us have to do certain regulatory requirements with our fleet and use our fleet very differently than personal use. It's more of a commercial application, and we're very governed and registered because of that. So historically, between pre-2016, our fleet services was very decentralized, very reactive in nature. Each department looked after their own equipment and vehicles, had a bunch of budgeting and life cycle issues associated with that, and didn't provide us a common level of maintenance, or it was very reactive maintenance. Although we did follow the Shamrock model, it was very inconsistent across the board. And the outcome of that, unfortunately, was some significant breakdowns and just a fleet that was not dependable to the requirements that we currently have. So which leads me to fleet today. Currently, we operate our fleet out of the operations center over the Mount Albert Sports Complex. We are using an operator who is a certified mechanic to assist us with the delivery of the fleet service. And he helps us with a coordination role, does light vehicle maintenance, supply of materials, and essentially a coordination role. And our focus, as I said, right now is on preventative maintenance rather than repair. We're trying to reduce downtime and improve reliability of the fleet. And our focus right now has been not only for CIS vehicles, but also for CPRC. And we're entering some discussions right now with ECSS to try and assist them with their support vehicles. Not at this point, they're the larger fire apparatus, but at least the support vehicles in bylaw. So some of the current initiatives we have going on, quite wide-ranging, anywhere from enhanced vehicle branding, the use of all-weather tires, and we've recently installed a Tweel. So it's essentially a brand new product that involves a combination of a rim and a tire for a vehicle. So it's very groundbreaking. We're one of the first municipalities to do that. And some of my key initiatives are vehicle right sizing, making sure we have the right size vehicle for the application, and GPS units in all our vehicles, or what we call AVL. We want to know where the vehicles are at all time and what it's doing. And that also allows us to look at mechanical fitness of that vehicle as it's going down the road, if there's any issues with it, anti-idling initiatives, that type of activity. As well, with part of the fleet today, we are working with N6. We have established a fleet working group that's never existed before. We had our first meeting following some assistance from the CAOs in October to pull this group together and see what we can do to harmonize the various fleets within the Northern Six. And we were hoping to do a light vehicle procurement cooperatively between everyone, and it's still a common direction we're working towards. But right now we're looking, because of various requirements in that regard, we're looking at in 2020 putting out a cooperative tender for rental vehicles and other opportunities. And I'm quite proud to say the next meeting of this group is in December, and we're looking for some real good results coming out of this group and some harmonization of the various fleets. So in the future, we are hoping to incorporate best practices within fleet and looking to formalize our business unit. Through partnerships both internally and externally with the Northern Six, we think we can do, quite honestly, a better job of what we're doing today. And we are looking at coming back with a formal asset management plan and a financial model to help guide fleet and make sure it's properly funded. To help us on the maintenance side, one thing we are lacking right now is dedicated fleet software. It's a real challenge to manage these assets, that anything from a lawnmower through a Zamboni to a snowplow. We need some tools to help us manage our fleet a little better. And I really can't overlook the issue of climate change. I've been quite pleased in the last couple of weeks to be able to talk to two senior meteorologists from the Weather Network, that one at an emergency services luncheon last week that ECSS put on through the region, and other as part of our winter operations training. Both these meteorologists worked at the Weather Network from the very beginning, and it was interesting on separate occasions to have them both say their number one concern right now is climate change, and that it's real, it is here, and to be expecting significant change as a result. It also impacts our fleet. We can have some impact on that as corporate citizens, so it's something we're striving for. So really fast, I'm just going to go through 4 of the things we hope to come out of the fleet strategy, which are 4 key areas. First one is life cycle. We've taken a look at the historical life cycle that we have, as well as best practices within the industry, and benchmarked local municipalities as well, to see, based on types of vehicle classes, are we replacing them at the right time, at least on paper? And quite thankfully, we are. We do recognize, it's highlighted there in red, that there's an opportunity to tweak some of these, one lowering the life cycle 1 year and another one increasing it. It's important that before we do any vehicle replacements, we look at mechanical fitness and repair history of that asset before it's even considered for replacement. Commercial vehicles are used very different than personal vehicles, but we want to make sure we're replacing the vehicle at the right time. And I did talk earlier about climate change. Definitely a hierarchy from going from fossil fuels to electric vehicles. We recognize it. It's very important, and I find it very important. We want to be environmental stewards and lead by example. Currently, some of the initiatives we're doing is fleet right sizing, very aggressive in anti-idling, and redeploying low-use assets. If a vehicle is not being utilized by one group, we're going to redeploy it to another group that's going to use it more, put more use in it. And we're very closely watching the development of new technologies, very specifically in heavy-duty equipment. There's opportunities for anti-idling as well as low fuel consumption, and I'm hoping to get into some battery electrification of larger vehicles, much like you're starting to see a transition for personal vehicles. And lastly, in that regard, any opportunities for grant funding, we'll be extremely aggressive on and try and take advantage of that. Procurement disposal, I know there's an agenda item on later today about disposal. Replacement assets right now, fleets involved in from a full review of the asset, from is it time for replacement based on life cycle, and it's fully governed by fleet. The thing I should mention here is that we take advantage of the biggest concession we can, which is provincial government. So any vehicle that's purchased, it is bought through tender, and we get advantage of public concession, provincial concession for that. It's very rare that a vehicle is bought off the lot. They're all factory orders, so we can take advantage of quite substantial savings. And that's done on a provincial level. Growth vehicles, we're playing a support role right now and helping various departments with not only specification, but also dollar amounts for their vehicle asks, and support them through their request for new vehicles. But we leave it up to the business unit to justify that ask. Excuse me. And finally is disposal. Everything that we dispose of is done through public auction, and I know there's an agenda item coming up today on that as well. And we've been quite happy with some of the results we've had from the public disposal. Resources, we're very, very anxious to move into a new home with thanks to Aaron and his team. I think it's wonderful, and Fleet's looking forward to transition to the new operations center. We do recognize that with future growth of the community and the associated growth of Fleet, there may be a phase 2 requirement for a future Fleet-specific area within the operations center, but that is many, many years from now, and we look forward to that move. And lastly, as part of the human resource complement of that, we are looking to transition the existing operator out of the roads group into a Fleet-specific role, leveraging this mechanic's license that he does have. So the next steps. The Fleet strategy is coming back to Council for consideration and direction for Fleet services, and we're hoping to bring this back within the next couple Council meetings. We want to provide ongoing module-based reports to Council to give you the opportunity to have focused discussions in specific areas, because it is quite a broad strategy right now and a very large strategy. And we do appreciate that Fleet's really evolving. Our goal here is to continue the transformation as a key operational service within the corporation and broaden it corporation-wide. So that's my quick presentation, and I welcome any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions from Council? Councillor Crone.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and you appreciate the presentation. It was very informative. I'm glad to see that we're undertaking this. I think when you look at, we're in the middle of starting our budget process, rather. It's not an insignificant amount of money that we spend on vehicles in this town, so I think it's timely. This may not be a fair question, but you may want to factor it into as you go forward with your preparations. With the fleet, it can also have a proper fleet strategy can also have a positive impact on the expense side. Certainly when we have staff going to and fro different areas in the area. I know certainly my last organization I was with, we looked at what was being expensed for personal mileage and found out that it was quite a chunk of change. And it got to the point where we were considering capping what you could do for personal mileage, but also encouraging our staff to take floater, we call them floater vehicles at the time, ones that weren't in direct service. And we found that that actually had a considerable positive impact on the bottom line. I throw that out for your future consideration as you go forward in your drafting of these the strategy. Thank you.
Councillor Foster.
Great presentation, Jeff. One thing that jumped out at me, I'm so glad to hear the Northern Six being mentioned. It seems to me that there's an opportunity for savings there that, we're getting better at it. I think we need to be better again. The only other thing that I thought of is how often is the possibility of using the region as a resource too? I mean, we're looking at the Northern Six and thinking about strategies and all this type of thing. Is there an opportunity that the region could be already there or on the way? And I mean, there's no sense in reinventing the wheel if something works. So is there that possibility for the Northern Six to reach out to the region as a resource?
Through Madam Mayor, I completely agree. I have previously been the fleet manager at the region. We did a one-year pilot, and it was quite successful due to the challenge is workloads and their availability to work on our assets instead of their own. But we are in December, we are meeting again as the Northern Six group and pulling the region as well as the Southern three municipalities into this discussion to look for harmonizations and opportunities like that. So I agree.
Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much, Mr. Maggot. Excellent. Gives us a plan on where we're going, and some of us here know where we've been over the years. Not that it hasn't been good and great. Times have changed. And with that, I'd like to comment about the hybrid electric, and then the last, you had hybrid electric and then vehicle technology. So I understand hybrid. I understand electric. What are we looking at for vehicle technology?
Vehicle technology could be as simple as anti-idling that's built right into it. So we're even leveraging remote starters on some of our vehicles now. So at least I can control idle time to 10 minutes. It's great to jump in a warm vehicle and go off, but I've got concerns when it's sitting there and running for an hour before someone gets into it because he gets sidetracked with other activities. So it's leveraging what's available in the marketplace, try and reduce greenhouse gas emissions and make our fleet more efficient.
Well, thank you. I'm looking forward to seeing some electric vehicles of ours with our logo on them, and hybrid at least, but if we can have electric, that's even better. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Roy DiClemente.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to Mr. Meggitt. I think I'm echoing what my colleagues here have said, that this is an ambitious strategy, and I think we're happy to see you undertaking it. It seems to me that if the N6 were to tender 34 vehicles, that we could certainly see some significant savings and some efficiencies in that process. And so, again, there's another opportunity there for us. And I would hope that the N6 would also consider one of your other key strategies, which is addressing that climate change issue as well. So what I'm hoping to see as we go forward through this is to create some benchmarks to say, you've identified some opportunities to save or to create efficiencies or to cut greenhouse gas emissions or whatever it is. If you can keep track of those and make that part of your annual reporting to us to say the strategy's working, here's what we've been able to deliver on, I think that would set you in a good spot. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I agree completely with that comment with all the comments that have been made. And I think that we need to start benchmarking some of the things that we're doing as far as climate change goes, because I think our residents are going to be asking for that more and more, and we need to show them exactly what we're doing. Can I get someone to move receipt of the presentation? Councillor Persechini. Seeing no more questions, all in favor? And that is carried. Thank you very much, Mr. Meggitt. Our second report is an update on the Ditch and Culvert Realignment Project. Mr. Newman.
I have nothing to add. I'm more than happy to answer any questions on the report.
Thank you. Can I get someone to motion to receipt? Councillor Crone, is there any questions on this? Councillor Foster.
Just a quick one. The second bullet point talks about the timing may be adjusted or advanced. Is there any best guess as to what type of adjustment that may be?
Through you, Madam Chair. Right now, Sharon Boulevard is slated to be reconstructed and resurfaced in 2020. The adjustment would be with Morton Avenue. Morton Avenue being there's a water main that needs replacing as well. So we're looking to bundle that up as an entire package. The status of the pavement there is not quite as critical, and the ditches seem to be working. So we will continue to monitor it, and as needs arise, we will address them.
Any other questions? Seeing none, all in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Anything else to add, Mr. Newman?
Nothing else to add, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from committee? Seeing none, I turn the chair back to you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. We're at item H, Community Parks, Recreation and Culture, with Councillor Persechini in the chair.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have one item. Community Parks, Recreation and Culture, CPRC, fireworks display update, the first item. General Manager, comments on, do you have any comments?
Through you, Mr. Chair, this is an update on a resident request on an alternate technology for a fireworks display. Staff's committed to continuing to monitor this emerging technology for possible future considerations.
Thank you. Could I have a mover, please? Okay, Councillor Carruthers. Any questions from members of the committees? Go ahead.
Thank you. What is the approximate cost of our two firework displays? The report shows that it's going to be 2 to 3 times more than traditional fireworks. What are we spending right now on traditional fireworks?
Congressman?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we spent approximately $17,000 for fireworks displays, and that includes Canada Day, and as well as a display on New Year's Eve.
Thank you very much. No other questions.
Any other questions from member committees? All in favor of this motions? Opposed? Motion carried. General Manager Commerson, do you have any other further reports or anything to add?
Through you, Mr. Chair, nothing further at this time.
Back to you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. We are at item I, corporate services with Councillor Morton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have 4 items under corporate services this meeting. The first one has to do with corporate services communication branch presentation. Mr. Valchich, who will be doing that?
Madam Chair, with your permission, I would ask our Director of Communications to come forward, Laura Hanna, and provide us with a brief presentation that just speaks to the current state of social media and some opportunities that we have to continue to expand our outreach and engagement using some of these tools. And I'm sorry, Danielle Verneau as well will also be presenting, so my apologies.
Hey, ladies.
Thank you, Mark. My name is Danielle Vernay. I'm the Communications Coordinator for the town, and presenting with me today will be Laura Hanna, our Director of Communications and Customer Service. So we're excited to share 2 new programs the communications team has been working on. Before we begin, I'm going to give you a brief overview of what social media in EG looks like. The town launched its social media channels, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube around 5 years ago. And as you can see on the screen, we use each channel to communicate a variety of messaging to our followers. These accounts are run by myself and Laura, with CPRC staff and HR posting some of their content. With so much happening around town, it can be challenging to know and communicate each department's messaging. So we've been working closely with the CPRC team to get exciting town event information posted leading up to, during, and following town events to give our followers more of a real-time coverage of town events to see what they can expect. Communications is still responsible for the initial branding of the content as well as really shaping the EG voice. Where is EG social media going? We've developed 2 new programs that will help elevate our social media presence, allowing us to expand the EG voice and connect with our followers using new, fresh, and engaging content. I'm now going to pass the presentation on to Laura, who will take you through the 2 new programs.
Thank you, Danielle. So the first program that we wanted to talk about today is an internal employee social media ambassador program. We will be looking for staff members from any departments doing any position within the town who would be interested in helping to profile their department's work through social media. Their commitment could be a one-time opportunity or a continuous partnership. It's really going to be shaped dependent on the interest of the employees at the town. We'll be looking for employees who are interested in photography, social media, or who just like telling stories about what it is that they do or what it is that their department does. The ambassadors will all have the opportunity to develop their own content for social media, and communications will provide training to ensure that we're adhering to the town brand standards and to finalize the content. The program will be developed so that our social media pages have new and exciting information for our residents. And some of our best posts actually already are developed in this manner. So for example, this picture that's seen on the slide here was submitted by Justin Tucker through his work with the CPRC department. When you have your staff right out in the community and they're able to snap these real-time photos, we find that we have a great engagement from our residents and they love to see what's happening right in the community. So you can see right on that photo there, I took some of the analytics that we were able to see, and there was 914 engagements on that photo. So that means that somebody clicked the post to read more, they clicked the link, they liked it, they shared it, that sort of thing. So that's quite a few engagements on a post that really Justin just snapped that when he was out doing his typical work. So it's a great opportunity for the residents to see what's happening in real time, but also our staff get to develop a little bit of their own portfolio and they get the opportunity to showcase what it is that they're doing, which I know a lot of our staff are passionate about. The second program that we're looking to launch is an external program, and this was developed through conversations with our council-appointed community advisory groups. These groups here, historically, we've maintained one voice, one social media channel for the town, This was specifically so that we could develop that East Gwillimbury voice over the last 5 years. It also gathers all of our followers in one account so that there can be cross-pollination of information. For example, if you have emergency services, public education messages going out, they'll get that same information as they would for CPRC program information. So that's really how we've ran these over the last 5 years. We also had the full control of the standards of what would be going out, and we had dedicated resourcing to ensure that those pages were kept up to date. However, with the new term of council, communications staff has met with several of the community groups, the ward-specific ones, and it's very clear that they're very eager, have a lot of great ideas, and are looking to communicate and connect with residents in their wards. So with that being said, we're happy to participate in a program where we could roll out community-specific Facebook pages or Twitter. It's up to the group specifically. That would really allow them to develop that community-specific connection, which we already see in some unofficial, they're not town-related groups, but in resident-run community groups. In order for this to roll out successfully, we have spent a significant amount of time developing some great tools for success. So these would require, so this was our policy development, which was an outline of the requirements for the new accounts. And it also has an application form. That application form outlines the resources that would be required to run these social media pages, what the content focus would be, who the target audience would be. That way, the community groups can spend some time thinking beforehand about what the reality of rolling out these pages would be and have very direct focus for the content. We've also committed to providing some training sessions. Those training sessions would really focus on ensuring that the site moderator, so that would be the main person responsible for the page, as well as the content moderator who would be posting content to the pages, have an education about social media best practices, how to keep their page aligned with town brand standards, and some tips for managing the account. What we would probably find is that many of the community members are very familiar with social media. However, not very many of them have probably ever run a page before. And so we just want to give some best practices, talk a little bit about how to engage the public. Some things might come up that they wouldn't have been foreseeing. So I think that it'll be a good opportunity to have those discussions. And we will also be providing assistance on an ongoing basis. So first and foremost, to help them set up the account. So there is some standard branding across the board, but then also to help them develop their content, make sure that if there's issues that come up with responding to residents, perhaps they would like some advice, we can be a part of that conversation throughout as well. And we've also developed a page disclaimer that mirrors the town's disclaimer, and that just outlines that the page is actually run by Council Advisory Committee volunteers and not town staff. So that's everything that we had to bring forward to you today, and we're happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Could I get a motion on this presentation, to accept this presentation? Councillor Roy DeClemente. Any questions for Danielle and Laura? Councillor Roy DeClemente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm actually delighted that Mr. Tom Horsley, who is the chair of our Queensville Sharon Community Group, is in the audience today, and he's hearing this presentation. This conversation has featured prominently at our committee meetings about how to connect and understanding that social media is almost mandatory if you're trying to build community and get word out about events and things that you're planning. And so I think this is a really I think we've been careful over the past 5 years as we built a brand, and I think we have some steps, and these are really good steps to help us get to the next phase in our communication strategy. So thank you very much for a very thoughtful way to respond to some needs that have been emerging. Thank you.
Councillor Crone.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate the presentation, full of a lot of good information, and I echo what Councillor Roy DeClemente said, that it's social media is mandatory now. I am was a little surprised to see our YouTube subscribers were a little light, given that we've invested some money in streaming this. And what can we do to up the numbers? Because I bet if we took away all the people up here out of the subscriber list and people that were on staff, it probably gets a little skinnier. So what can we do to boost our, not that I'm looking for ratings, but I would like to see a few more people watching our our council meetings. Maybe it speaks to why Rogers Cable got out of covering council. Anyway, I welcome any suggestions you have. I'm happy to help out.
Right, through you, Madam Chair, I would like to point out that it's just the subscribers, so those aren't actually the numbers of who's watching each week, so those numbers are significantly higher. In my personal opinion, I would feel that many people understand that the platform of Facebook or Twitter is to interact by following or liking a page, whereas YouTube, I think that in the general public, most people don't actually subscribe to those pages. They just go when it suits them. So what we could do is try to change that dialogue about what it means to subscribe versus just visiting to watch perhaps today's meeting. And so the difference would be that you might get those alerts. And so if we try to brand that a little bit differently and communicate that with the public, we could take a look at trying to raise those numbers so that people who maybe go and watch occasionally might get those reminders and watch more often.
Any further questions? Okay. Thank you, ladies, very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
All in favor of that presentation? We will move on to number 2. Item 2, which is the financial branch presentation. Mr. Valtrich, who will be leading this one.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Our Director of Finance, Warren Marshall, and our Manager of Procurement, Mike Gary, with your permission, we'll do a brief presentation really to set the stage for a procurement bylaw update that we're proposing. This has been some time in the works, and I think that council members will know that this is a topic that's been discussed over the past few years. And although our bylaw has certainly served us very well, I think the proposal that you're going to hear about is an attempt to simply modernize it and update it and make it a little more relevant to 2019. So with that, with your permission, I would turn it over to the Director and Manager.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. The purchasing bylaw sets the rules on how the town can purchase its goods and services. It also gives guidelines as to how what staff is allowed to do in that process. The bylaw actually applies to about 2/3 of the town's operating and capital expenditure on an annual basis. So it has a wide scope. And through the bylaw, there are some prime objectives that that the bylaw tries to achieve. And the first is to ensure that the process is actually fair and unbiased. The bylaw is also constructed so that we can ensure that there's competition, which also helps the town obtain best value in its purchases of its goods and services. We also want to make sure that the bylaw complies with legislation, which includes not only the Municipal Act, but the various treaties that are in place. So the current bylaw was passed in 2004, and it does get reviewed on a regular basis. And at this point, staff have identified some areas that need to be, or that we suggest that should be updated. Some are based on recommendations from internal audit reviews of the procurement function. Some are based on best practices that we have done a scan on, and some are just more administrative and make the bylaw more clear and concise. So up until a few years ago, the town was the only municipality in York Region that didn't have a centralized purchasing function or a procurement manager to look after that function. So in 2016, a procurement manager was hired. And through that hiring, there were a lot of things that happened that helped with the procurement process. So for example, processes were standardized, templates were brought out that made the process more in line with standards, and we were also able to consolidate and centralize the procurement function, which also helps with control and risk management. Through also in 2018, we actually rolled out the process of issuing tenders electronically. And that had numerous benefits to the town. That include we were able to make the templates within the system standardized. So vendors were able to more easily complete their bids and with less errors. So it virtually eliminated the rejection of bids because of non-compliance. It also made evaluating the bids easier because it was in the system and it kicked out a response for the lowest bid. So there were a lot of advantages to it. So we've been using that on a regular basis. And it's also made the process quicker for staff to review. So as well, we've been trying to focus on consolidating purchasing and getting more group purchases. So you heard in previous presentation about our N6 initiatives that we've been trying to accomplish. We've been focusing on other areas as well. For example, our insurance and our joint training and development initiatives have all been procured through the N6 initiative. As well, we've been trying to look inside the town and consolidate our purchases. So an example I'd like to provide is photocopiers. So previously, the town each department would lease their photocopiers, and through the procurement office in 2018, we were able to negotiate a contract where we purchased the photocopiers for a savings of about $40,000 over the term of the lease that we had previously. And on top of that, we were able to generate some operating savings in the cost of the per page charge, which generates about a $6,000 to $8,000 savings per year. So there are some parameters under which the bylaw applies. So in order to purchase any type of good or service within the town, there has to be a council approval. The purchasing within the bylaw is only for business-related uses. It's not for personal use at all. We've also constructed the bylaw so it's consistent with the town's code of conduct and the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. The bylaw applies to, as I mentioned before, the majority of purchases within the town. There are some exemptions that we'll get into a bit later, but it does apply to basically every type of purchase. And finally, that if there's a conflict between the outstanding treaties and the bylaw, which is pretty rare, but in the event there is a conflict, the treaties do rule. So I thought it would be useful to kind of do an overview of how the town purchases the majority of its goods and services and the methods behind it. So the first item is a low dollar value purchase, which is a pretty accurate term. It's for mainly our day-to-day and operational items. We do try to find best value, so we'll go out, but it's a more informal process. The next is the request for quotations, where we do require staff to obtain or to solicit at least 3 bids from vendors to get the best price and best value. A request for tender takes place when we know what we're looking for. It's very specific and identifiable. So for example, if we want to purchase some materials like sand or salt, we know the quantity, we know what we're looking for. So basically the evaluation is who's going to give us the best price. So we would issue a request for tender, and that's issued, and it's open to anyone who would like to bid. That is a little different than the request for proposal, where it's still open to anyone who would like to submit a bid, but the method or what we're looking for could be delivered in different ways. So for example, a study, there are different ways to come up with results of a study, different technical needs and different technical requirements. So there's two evaluation pieces to that. So there's a technical element to it and a price element to it. So it's the difference between the tender and a proposal. And finally, an emergency purchase, where basically there's a threat to public health, safety, welfare, or public property, or there would be a significant impact to service delivery. So staff is still required to try to get the best value and best price, but since the time limits of the emergency would prevent us from doing a full competitive bid, there are some parameters around how staff can go ahead and purchase through an emergency purchase. So with that, I will turn it over to the manager of procurement, Mike Garrier.
Could I get a motion to accept this presentation? Madam Mayor.
Not quite over yet.
Mayor Haxton.
Best as yet. Thank you very much. So as Warren alluded to, there are some changes here that we wanted to just go over some of the highlights, if you will. So the emergency purchase authorization changes were not exceeding 100,000. In the present bylaw was the authorization of the purchasing manager to the department head, treasurer, designate, and those are the key changes. Then over 100,000 from treasurer and CAO to the CAO. Contract renewals. So contract renewals can be quite confusing because people will talk about an extension to a contract, but it's not really a renewal. So we followed along the same guidelines as the York region several years ago. So if there's no ability to be able to renew that contract, so if it's a 3-year with an option for year 4 or year 5, then it's not renewable. We can do a small extension if we waited too late to go out for another tender, but basically we have to go out for a new contract. So if there is a provision in there for a contract renewal, that's why it says, in accordance with the approval terms and original contract, then that's really what we can do. So the total cost also, when we're looking at total cost for the purpose of approvals and so forth, it's also the option years. So if we had a 3-year contract with an option for 2 more additional years, we would estimate that cost over that entire 5 years, right? That's what we'd be looking for an approval. So we wouldn't have to go back. That's the theory, is not to have to go back to council. We could actually award that year 4 or year 5 if conditions were correct and the performance of the contract was good, and we still wanted it. We felt the price was being held or it was a reasonable increase. Vendor performance is something that every municipality that I've talked to has struggled with, and we had basically authorization to refuse bids from the treasurer, and that's not really fair for any one area responsibility or any individual. We could get a lot of challenges with that. So similar to what we do with the bid review committee, if we have an issue with a bid, we do it by committee. I brought in the vendor review committee, which is legal and procurement and a manager from the department that basically comes and looks at it from a case-by-case basis and decides whether or not we can salvage it or whether or not we have to basically ban that bidder for a period of time. So I can tell you from my experiences, I've been here in about 2.5 years, that I've intervened probably a half a dozen times on contracts, and we've always been able to resolve the issue. Bring the vendor in, sit down with the department, and work it out, because it's always in the best interest of the vendor to do that. They want to do business with us. Sometimes communications get broken down. So this is really sort of a last resort, if you will. If we can't salvage it, then we decide as a committee how we're going to go forward. This is really housekeeping. There was a lot of items that were basically in the present bylaw that were really procedural, right? So we talked about Schedule A, which were exceptions, and we've dealt with exceptions in Section 4 of the bylaw. And you can't list everything because there's always one more thing you can add on. So Schedule B talked about bid irregularities. I'll go as far as to say we don't have bid irregularities anymore since we've introduced electronic bidding. Because basically the system ensures that the bidder has signed, that they bid on time with the on-line clock, and that they've acknowledged addenda, and they can't change anything on the bid. All they can do is put in the unit prices. So virtually there's nothing they can do wrong. As long as their bond is good, and it's a digital bond now, they don't have to come in and see our shiny faces anymore. And that's why we have a very lonely bid box out there, tender box. If anybody needs it for anything, it's available because we don't need it anymore. Surplus stock, there was another issue we talked about as a new policy for disposal of assets, which I know is coming up. I think it's prudent to look at this because it is an asset. I think if I can borrow some of our legal team from the region's attitude towards procurement bylaw, it's the most important piece of legislation we can give because it's how we deal with the taxpayers' money. And also the asset, of course, has value. So we want to make sure that we're doing our due diligence. What this is going to mean is that individuals coming up and saying, can I buy this or can I purchase that, may not be a possibility because we have to go out and ensure that we've gone out for auction, as Jeff alluded to earlier, for vehicles and so on. So the other exemptions are acquisitions of lease of real property, tenant improvements, utilities, training, that kind of thing. Catering, we don't deal with that. And I want to talk a little bit about consolidation and group purchasing. You know, we hear a lot about N6 here, which is great, and we're doing more with N6. But there's also the York Purchasing Co-op, which involves all the N6 plus 3 of the lower tier, and also includes York Region. Councillor Foster was talking about York Region. York Region has great resources, and they can assist us in many ways. They do a lot of the major procurements for salt, for sand, for fuel right now, but I think there may be an opportunity for vehicles, and I think that's a good way to view that, is to look at the big brother first and see if they can help us out there. There has been a meeting that we had several months ago where Jerry Paglia, the director for the procurement office, came to our meeting and said he would be spearheading some things. So I'd like to open up that door again and see what they can do for us. I think there's more opportunity there. There's some things that we talked about recently, and this comes up, I'm sure you've heard of it, of green procurement. Green procurement is something that's got knocked around a lot, and it sounds good, but you really have to put some parameters and some intelligence to it. So it's like paper is a great example. How much would you be willing to pay for paper? Would you be willing to pay, 10 times as much or whatever? There's always a threshold in your own personal procurements and the procurements for the town. So once we establish what those standards are and that we're environmentally responsible, then we can lock that in and say, okay, here's where we're comfortable. This is where we are. And that's not a cop-out. That's just basic economics, right? We have to be realistic as to what the technology is out there now. Case in point, Irving Oil just got caught a few years ago because they said they were going to plant so many trees every time that they destroyed a tree, but the trees they were taking out were hardwood and they were putting in Christmas trees. So they were exposed. So you have to be really careful. What came up with the economic development area in SMT recently was local vendor preference. And this is where I have to let people down a little bit, because with local vendor preference, that is in violation of the trade treaties and of the Competition Act. So there are opportunities to be able to do things with people in your community, but I think for the purpose of doing procurements, we have to make sure it's competitive, fair, and transparent, and then we're making sure that we offer the very best value for the taxpayers. That is something that's been tried and failed miserably and has been contested by other vendors, aggrieved vendors that didn't get an opportunity. The other problem is, what is local? So, if I'm doing a service contract for Jeff for his vehicles, I can say that you must have a response time within 2 hours, right? But that means that somebody from British Columbia could actually have an agency here, have a shop. As long as they can respond within 2 hours, that's fine by me. So you have to be very careful how you do those. So that's basically the letdown on the local vendor performance, their preference, if you will. So there's a lot of opportunities with the system. I don't know how much you've heard about the bids and tender system that we put in a little over a year ago, but not only does it do a much more streamlined job at receiving, and it makes it easier for our contractors to be able to go online and receive bids. We get more competition, we get better pricing. It does a lot of work for us, and it also has a contract module. I struggle here to find out what contracts we have, so I'm working with legal now and with asset management to try and identify these contracts, small and large, because they're all important. They all need insurance, right? We have to be careful if somebody gets hurt or worse on the job. That's happened a lot lately. You've probably heard on the news around Toronto area. So we have to make sure that even those $5,000 and $10,000 jobs, that we have insurance in place. This system will not only ensure we have everything in place in there, but it will also ensure that we have our insurance and our WSIB, and it even alerts us as to when those expire. There's a brand new module coming out, which I'm getting trained on this week, which actually goes deeper down into the project level. So I want to be able to work with the departments as we start the projects. And one thing I'd love to be able to do here is be able to create better planning, better time matrices on what we're going to do and what we at least plan on doing for each quarter. So I think with those things in place, we can even do better than we have now. And that's basically our presentation. Any questions?
Questions? Councillor Persechini.
Not a question, just a comment. We're just discussing though this morning. I had a meeting with Mark and his team, and we're just talking about all this. It's all happening. I'm really pleased the direction we're going, and continue doing that. It's going to save us a lot of money. So, and this was my wish, and a lot of the stuff we discussed this morning, it's all happening. So, thank you very much to the staff and all involved, because this is all about saving some money out there. Thank you.
Councillor Carruthers.
There we go. Thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation. It's the amount of transparency in this is very good. Anyone who's watching from home can see exactly what our process is. So I thank you for that. I have 3 questions, comments. One is on the key changes to the bylaw, the increase of the limit from $1,000 to $10,000. That seems like a big jump. I'm just wondering what the current practice is between the other N6.
So thank you for that question. That's a good question. So I believe that the Township of King is still at $5,000, but all of the other municipalities within York Region are at $10,000.
Okay.
We felt that 1,000 was a little low in this day and age. And since the bylaw was done last in 2004, when I had less gray hair, I think that we were kind of thinking that it might need to be brought up. And having said that, that doesn't mean carte blanche, they just go to one vendor or one contractor and that's it. The department head is still responsible, through discussions with procurement. If they feel it's good value, fine. But if they feel that there's an increase or need to go out for more competition, we still have done that, and we will.
Thank you. My next question is on the request for tender. That is usually currently awarded by council,
right.
And the proposal is to take that away from council, and it would be the department head who would do it. I have a bit of a problem with that with very large tenders. I think that there should be a dollar value assigned where it does come to council after a certain dollar value. And I'm just wondering if you can give me some background on why the decision was made that no tenders would come to council anymore.
Absolutely. Great question. So what we did was we went back and we looked, and we couldn't find a situation where council had overturned the recommendation. And we felt that within budget and a competitive bid, and the department feeling, yes, this is a good price, that there wasn't really any value in breaking it and taking it back to council. Of course, council is wanting to do that. That's fine, but that was just basically administrative, because it does take. I know a lot of my deadlines, if you will, are predicated on when they can go to council. So this is another way to be able to speed up the process, because we felt that it wouldn't change anyway. Now on the proposals, request for proposals, quite the same as it always has been. $100,000 threshold, best overall score based on 80% technical and 20% price, which still go to council for your approval. But we felt that that this might be a way to expedite awards.
Okay, I think there is a certain value where it should be coming to council.
Sure.
I'm not sure where that is. We'd have to look at what usually gets tendered. And even though council routinely approves it and rarely overturns it, I think there's just a level of oversight that's expected from our residents that we are overseeing any large tenders. And my last comment or question is on the emergency purchase authority changes. Over $100,000 with one person, I think is not prudent. We have a wonderful CAO, but at some point he may retire, and who knows who would come in his place. And I just think giving someone carte blanche with no upper limit and no one to second provide sober second thought, no one to define what is considered an emergency. I'm not sure that that is responsible. If it's not going to be the treasurer, maybe it can be the mayor. But I think any thing over $100,000 needs to have a second person approve it.
Mr. Welch, did you have comments for that?
Madam Chair, we certainly could change that. I just want to clarify a couple of things on this one, that emergency purchases would actually come back to council. This is based on the fact that there's a very time-sensitive emergency that needs to be enacted prior to coming to a council meeting. But all of these that are emergency in nature would in fact come back to council for information. So there would be full reporting and transparency on that. And we would always have discussions as a senior management team or as an emergency control group on any of these. I think the idea, and we can leave it as treasurer and CAO if council prefers, that's not a problem. It was simply trying to provide a little bit more a streamlining to a situation that might be very time sensitive. But either way, quite frankly, would work for us. I do want to, if I could, Madam Chair, just go back, comment briefly on the request for tender piece that was discussed. The issue that was discussed here was, are there adequate controls already in place that are in fact approved by council? And so from our review of that, council would approve the procurement bylaw, number one. So we would procure in accordance with council approved policy. And number two is any project or procurement would have to be tied to an approved council budget. So council would have already reviewed that, approved that to proceed. We would proceed in accordance with council approved protocol. And the issue that Mr. Garrier said about, we went back and looked at 5 years to see whether there was anything overturned. There has not been, in the history that we look back, anything overturned. In fact, if council did choose to overturn it, it would likely put the organization at risk. And the reason is because the requests for tenders are simply being evaluated based on price point for the lowest compliant bid. So there's not a discretionary component to that. And so one of the options that we looked at, and I'm not sure if it made it in to the proposed bylaw or not, is for those larger ones, do we come back with an information report to council to at least advise council that the following tenders have been processed and awarded in accordance with the budget approved by council and in accordance with the council approved procurement policy. So that was just a little bit more of the discussion and thinking on that, just for your information as you're considering this.
I would be happy with that, with it coming back to council as for information. What would be some of our larger tenders?
Well, our largest tender was the operations center, which was under 17 million. Most of our tenders would be somewhere in the $1 to $2 million, the larger ones. A majority would be under the million. That would be an exception.
Thank you. I still think that coming before council with items that large would be prudent.
Councillor Foster, you have a question?
Just a comment. I agree with what Councillor Carruthers is saying. I understand where she's coming from. The $100,000 and up. Again, we are a governing body. The only thing that I'm thinking of, and I couldn't get it straight in my head when I was going through this, and Chief Mackenzie might be able to help me out with this one. I'm a little bit off my my days of being an alternate CEMC. When we're talking about emergency purchases, should there be something written in the procurement bylaw that differentiates between what we consider to be a regular emergency purchase or a purchase that is being done when an emergency is declared? And I guess to go along further with that, is there a mechanism, Madam Mayor, or anybody else, that council could be contacted when something like this is going on and not actually have to be in a council meeting?
Chief, do you have a question or an answer for his first question?
Through your chair to Councillor Foster, I don't have an immediate answer, but there are provisions within the control group, I believe, to look after this sort of thing, that it doesn't fall by the wayside. But with your permission, I could certainly look into it and report back.
I believe there is.
So if I may, there is a definition in the bylaw for personal, so any danger to personal safety, property, major costs. So there is a definition. It's not something that would be a poor planned item, right? What people would call, when they come into my office sometimes, say this is an emergency. Is it really? No, there's, this worked quite well when I was at the region too. We would differentiate between what was truly an emergency, what somebody needed to react now. We didn't want them to feel their hands were tied and couldn't start an issue with water quality or something of that nature, or disaster. So that's really what the intent would be for that.
Okay. Mayor Haxton, you had a question?
Thank you. Just a comment regarding the comment of Councillor Carruthers with the larger spending and the ability for staff to move it forward without coming to council. I guess I'm old school, but when it comes to $1 million and more, I think we should be aware of it. I'm not sure that, as you said, that we have ever overturned anything that staff have determined was important. However, there's just something about $1 million plus that if we're all sitting here, we know about it. We're aware of it. So when we walk out into the community and somebody says you just spent $1 million last week on whatever, or 25 million, we're well aware of it and we're well versed in what it was. And yes, we were a part of that decision. I would struggle, and I don't know if 1 million is the answer, but I would struggle when your example is the new ops center. That's significant. There's never been a spending like that in the history of East Gwillimbury. This building certainly didn't cost anywhere near that. So for us to be a part of this at this time in our tenure here, I think it's important that it comes back and it's public. I can't ever imagine that somebody's going to say, no, that's, we can't vote for that. It's just a matter of an awareness for all of us. And I think the importance of the dollars that we spend come from our public, and so we do it in a public fashion.
Thank you. Councillor Crone, did you have a question?
Thank you. I would echo some of the comments made. I certainly would have greater comfort in participating in a decision that was, the mayor's comments, $1 million or more. Certainly we would, presuming we would be involved in the process where we allocate the money at budget time for such projects of that magnitude. But I would feel a greater comfort if we had final sign off on the tender. Secondly, I want to let you know I support the moving the $1,000 limit up to 10,000. I think if we're going to be an organization of this size, we have to be nimble and quick and initiate that. When I was a department head, I had a delegation of authority of 50,000. So I'm not suggesting we give you 50,000 today, but 10,000 seems reasonable. I'm assuming there's a double sign off on the on authorizing the expenditures. I'm seeing nods over here from Mr. Velchik, so that's good. I know certainly oversight is a big deal, and it happens. You have abuse that happens in private organizations and public organizations, and I think we can all think of an example of times when a department head has, acted in a unethical way and lined their pockets, and we need to make sure that we have proper oversight. Not suggesting that anyone here would do that, but it happens in every organization, so we can't be, turning a blind eye to it. I guess my last comment, and I'm really happy to see discussion about vendor preference being local. That's something, I'm sounding like a broken record on that. I didn't notice it in the actual bylaw. If you could point me to the right page of that, I think that would be good. I would almost even go as far as to say that if it comes down to a contract where we're so close that if a local vendor is within 5% of the cheapest, I would say give it to the local vendor. I really think we need to do everything we can to help out our local businesses and support them. 5%, that's not a heck of a lot to help out the people that pay taxes and live in our community. Anyway, that's my comments. If you have any feedback, I'm happy to hear it.
Yeah, it's a pretty common theme throughout North America, and it's got great intent and it's got huge consequences. And I'd be glad to talk about it further when we have more time to discuss. But I think my first and foremost function here is to keep everybody out of trouble. So, if I may, I think that's the thing that I wake up every day and go to bed thinking about. So I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't mitigate the risk or completely avoid it whenever possible. And every time you look to favor a vendor, you prejudice another one. So it depends on where you're sitting. There are many things that you can still do as a council, I'm sure you're aware. And I've always been very successful at trying to keep those out of that procurement realm. So it's a pure, competitive, and fair, and open, and transparent process, that means that we don't get any challenges. And even with that, you can still get some challenges, but I think we've done fairly well. That's my comment on that one.
Okay, Councillor Roy Clemente, and then Mayor Haxton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that that sentiment is certainly one that I share. When I joined council, that was when I was chair of corporate and financial services, and Mr. Valchich and I had that conversation because there were members of, you'll be horrified, Mr. Garrier, to hear that there were members of council who used to sit here and open the bid boxes and read out the tenders. And I saw that as an issue of risk management and one that needed to be mitigated post haste. And so this has been a long time in coming as far as I'm concerned. And I think it gives us a really good roadmap for those people who want to do business with us and for residents who want to understand how we are spending their money. For me, there was a couple of comments that I had. The emergency expenditure, I would feel more comfortable if we had two people overseeing it. And I know whether it's a declared emergency or whether it's, I think there are enough people involved in the EOC or that are involved in this organization that you can get two people, whether give them general titles, but at least that you have two people who are working together and making that decision. And as far as the request for tender and that, the $1 million expenditure or whatever that threshold is, while I recognize and respect that we haven't overturned and that had we overturned it, we would be putting ourselves at risk. And we've been lucky, quite frankly, over the years that we haven't had any issues. For me, it closes the loop in the budget process. So we're about to embark on this process now. We're going in November. We're going to approve it in December. And then next June, we're going to buy something that's $1 million. How many people bid on it? Did we get good pricing? Were there any issues? All of those things. When that happens, that's a trigger to say, oh yes, I remember when we talked about that 6 months ago, and now it's come to fruition and it's happening. Because that was the other challenge that we had in that capital program, was we had projects that we had approved that aged because it didn't get done in the work plan in the year, and then we had money sitting in budgets waiting to be spent. Projects weren't getting done, but this closes the loop for us. And quite honestly, when we awarded that contract for the Ops Center, that was a huge day for this organization and the people at this table. And so whether it's receiving a report that says, here's how it went down, folks, and now we're moving forward, shovels will be in the ground in 3 weeks. That, I think, is part of that loop, that information stream, and I think it's an important step that we would lose if we didn't have that connection. Thank you.
Okay, hearing no other questions or seeing no other questions. I must apologize, council members, because I should have also stated there is another couple of lines here that I should have read out first so that it can be approved, and I apologize for that. So as well as motioning to receive the presentation, there is another line that states that the revised procurement bylaw branch or draft attached be brought forward to council approval on December the 3rd, 2019. So all in favor of that motion? Question. Councillor Roy DiClemente.
Thank you. Just a question on the motion. I think we've provided some feedback that would result in this draft bylaw being amended. And so I'm not sure whether, I don't want to slow this down because it's been, from my perspective, at least 10 years in the making. But perhaps what we could do is ask staff that they bring us an amended bylaw for consideration at our meeting on December 3rd, and maybe a cover memo explaining what has been addressed would be helpful.
Okay. Mr. Valchich?
Madam Chair, that's as well what I was going to suggest is that we would, I've heard at least a couple of notable amendments that we would make to the proposed bylaw, and we'll bring it back to you at the next meeting for your further consideration.
And you've got that? Okay. So then all in favor of that amendment? Motion is carried. Okay. Third item under this chair has to do with the disposal of assets policy. Mr. Valtrich?
Madam Chair, this report is really fairly brief and highlights proposed protocol for disposal of assets. Essentially, there was language in the prior or in the current procurement bylaw that spoke briefly to disposal of surplus assets, but our procurement manager and director of finance believe that it's probably prudent to have this separated. So one policy deals with the acquisition of assets and one policy deals with the disposal of assets. And I think this just tries to clarify what that disposal protocol would look like to ensure that we're getting good value for money in terms of any assets that we are disposing of.
Thank you, Mr. Valtrich. Can I have a motion to receive this? Councillor Persechini? Any questions from council? Okay, hearing none. All in favor? Motion's carried. And the next one and last one under corporate services is the financial branch report on the Wingfoot Development Charges Credit Agreement. Mr. Valchich.
Madam Chair, this is a routine report that simply confirms the proceeding with a credit agreement for front-ended works by the developer, and it's done in accordance with the council-approved DC credit policy.
Okay. Can I have a motion to accept this? Councillor Roy DiClemente. That's your question. Okay.
I'm happy to make the motion. I just a question through you, Madam Chair. I don't know if it's to Mr. Valchich or maybe to Mr. Karmazin. This is members of committee will know that this is a much needed bridge that's been that was washed out and needs to be instated. Do we have a sense of when we can get shovels in the ground to put the footings in? Is this during the winter that we're going to get started, or do residents have to wait till spring? Mr. Valchich.
Through you, Madam Chair, we would endeavor to excavate and pour the footings for the bridge over the winter months. Order the bridge fabrication as a long lead delivery item. So we would then, through the developer, order the bridge to have it installed onto the footings into the late spring, early summer.
Any other further questions on this item? Hearing none. All in favor? Opposed? No? Okay. Motion's carried. Any other questions for Mr. Valchich? Hearing none. Mr. Valchich, do you have anything further to say?
Madam Chair, just a reminder that the budget deliberations will start next Monday, and that we do have some supplementary information that's going to be distributed. We're hoping by end of day tomorrow or early Thursday to assist you in preparation for next Monday. We've been meeting with individual members of council to try and prepare you for those deliberations, but we still have a few days left this week. So if anything else comes up between now and the end of the week, certainly that will be our priority to meet with you and get you whatever you need to help you out.
Thank you. Hearing nothing else, I turn the chair back to you then, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. We're under item J, and that's Emergency and Community Safety Services with Councillor Roy DeClemente.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There are no prepared items on our agenda today. Chief Mackenzie, do you have anything to bring forward at this time?
With respect, none.
Members of committee, anything you'd like to raise? I had one item. I just wanted to let committee know I was copied on a couple of emails internally about our Toys for Tickets pilot project, and it's being extremely well received by the community. I've seen a couple of social media posts that people were planning to deliberately park badly so they could get a ticket and pay it with a toy. So, so there was a cute little response, but just wanted to let folks know that there was people were tagging their spouses and saying just in case. Anyway, I just thought I would commend staff for bringing that forward, and I think it has been a success. I know there's going to be a report that closes it out for us, but just as it's ongoing now, I thought I would share that with you. So other than that, I'll turn the chair back to you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. We're at item K, and that's administration with myself in the chair. This time there are no reports on the docket. Mr. Webster, do you have any information that we should be aware of?
3 items, Madam Mayor, if I may. Number one, just devoting back to emergency services, our former chief and retiring employee Phil Dawson, after a career with us, is leaving us at the end of this year. And on the 21st or Thursday of this week, there's a little recognition ceremony. Just wanted to bring that to folks' attention for Phil Dawson. Secondly, Chair Emerson convened another follow-up meeting regarding the Upper York sewage system status. And this was on November 8th after our last committee of the whole. In attendance were the mayors and CAOs of East Gwillimbury, Newmarket, and Aurora. They provided an update of discussions that were being held at the ministry level. And following that meeting, one of the other key regional projects, which was the Duffin Creek wastewater plant, significant plant, was a component of it was approved by the ministry that had been under review for quite a while. And they remain hopeful that there's going to be some positive news regarding the Upper York. So the mayor and myself will continue to advocate and attend these meetings and provide updates as we can. And the third one is just a comment on this committee of the whole. It's had a little bit of a different slant today. If those notice, we've had a bit more presentations. And I think with both regards to the procurement strategy and the fleet strategy, these are items that up till recently were bolted onto people's jobs as sort of other duties as assigned. People sometimes ask, what are the benefits of growth? And what good does growth do? And I can tell you, if we tactically recruit people with good skill sets that have good experience, you're seeing in these two areas, I think, strategy development that's going to lead to long-term efficiencies and cost savings for public we serve. And today, I believe one of the councillors, Councillor Crone, talked about, we have a lot of things going on with heritage lists and a lot of talk about lists and who's on the list and not on the list. And I think that we are taking some strong moves there right now to develop a real strategy that will be council endorsed. So those are just some observations of the presentations today. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now move to item L, and that's legal and council support services with Councillor Foster from the chair.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have nothing prepared on the agenda for today. Mr. Horner, anything for committee?
Nothing to add, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Lamanna.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, just like to highlight the new monitor, side projector monitor. I'm not sure if council members have noticed. This is was put in by our manager of IT through his contractor. We're getting the rear center monitor replaced as well. It's a 4K. It's part of the upgrades to the chambers. It certainly is highlights some of the picture qualities for our live streaming as well. So thank you to Randy and his team.
Thanks, Mr. Lamanna. Good to see some upgrades. Any questions from committee? Seeing none, we'll move it back to you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. We're at item M, and that is other business. I have one item regarding the Diversity and Inclusion Advisory Committee report regarding the recognition of high holidays and a faith calendar. And are there questions? Yes, go ahead, please.
I'll speak to that as the council liaison. Just to be clear, the faith calendar is not a picture calendar. It's just a list of dates. So we're not talking about producing anything. The attachment is from the school board, which was the best example that the committee could find. This request actually originated with staff. If you read the report, you saw that our open house was held on the eve of Yom Kippur. So excuse me, staff would appreciate having a list of dates that they can take a look at. The school board calendar shows Diamond Days, which are the high holidays, and then a bunch of other dates. The recommendations are that the committee take a look at this and develop it rather than being August to July, being on our own calendar year. And then there's another recommendation to bring this back to the committee to look at communicating. We don't say Happy Good Friday, right? So you need to know what exactly the language is with each of these different holidays so that we can tweet something out or post something on social media to recognize these high holidays for members of our community. So those are the recommendations that are before you.
Other questions? Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think it's a really helpful and worthwhile endeavor to create that list so that it can be used as a tool for our staff as they're starting to plan public information centers, public meetings where we're looking for feedback, our open houses and key events, our music at Civic Square, all those sorts of things. My only concern would be that I see us as a secular organization, and the minute that you start to introduce faith organizations into the mix, you create some challenges. And I'm not necessarily comfortable with directing staff to be taking communications staff resources to be allocated towards celebrating various faiths. I think it's important that we recognize and acknowledge that there is a diverse community here, and that we plan accordingly and respectfully for them. but I don't wish to be allocating communications resources that could be used for more important things like road closures or other events like that. So I'm happy to see this move forward as far as creating that list, but as far as directing staff to be saying special greetings for different segments, I don't think that's a good use of our communications resources.
I'm wondering if we, let's get the calendar, and I think it will be very useful for all of us, including our staff and when we're out in the community as well. And then once we have it put together for a full year, then let's take a look at what usage may take place with it when it comes back. I know that the school board use for many municipalities has happened. The school board calendar has been used many times because they have always had a very strong list that were reliable. And so I think that's really important that we piggyback along there and make sure that we have the right ones at this time, and then decide how far we're going to reach with it. Okay, thank you. There's no other questions? All those we're moving that. Yes, the 4 recommendations. We haven't defined what we're going to be doing with this calendar once we have it, that we're going to get the calendar.
So the challenge that I have then, Madam Mayor, is that this is actually that they would bring us back a calendar in order to inform staff with planning town events, which is great, and then communicating with the public and celebrating our diversified faith and cultures. That's where I have a bit of an issue where we're directing staff to do the communication. So if we're simply endorsing the recognition and ask that they bring us a faith calendar for our consideration, that's what I'm fine with. But the additional language there is a bit.
Would you like that one removed
wrinkly
at that time?
Yes,
and then
please.
perhaps as I said earlier, once we have it in our hands,
Mhm.
then we can determine at what level we're going to
Yes.
implement it.
Happy to. Thank you.
Councillor Carruthers.
I believe that this is important. If we are saying that you can't say recognize Diwali or Chinese New Year, then we shouldn't be recognizing Christmas either. I mean, I don't think we should be picking and choosing which holidays we recognize and which ones we don't. The calendar that the school board uses has had extensive vetting and consultation with large groups representing every faith. And so I just think it's picking and choosing to say that we don't want to celebrate anything except Christian holidays. And I think that this calendar would allow us to put out a message. And we're not talking about every week or all of the holidays that are on there, but I think there's 20 significant days. And I think that the staff resources and communication to put out 20 messages to wish our diverse community, greetings on their high holidays when we do it for Christmas and Easter and New Year's and everything else. I don't think it's a waste of our communication resources. I think it's a way of welcoming our new committees, and I would like that to stay on there. And if we want to separate them out and have people vote individually on that, I think asking the committee it's an advisory committee. They're advising that we recognize these holidays. I would like that to stay on there as a recommendation that's coming from them, and council can vote how they wish. If we're not celebrating holidays through communications, then that is a decision by council, but I don't think we should pick and choose.
Councillor Roy DiClemente.
It's not my motion, so with respect, I would like to separate out that there's 4 clauses. One of them is that we receive. Another one is that we are directing by utilizing town communication channels to recognize holidays identified in the faith calendar. That's the clause that I would like separated out for a separate vote. then that we direct them to prepare and present back to the committee a calendar so that we can celebrate that. The challenge is, A, we're not the school board, and B, we're a secular organization. And so whether it's we stop celebrating Christmas, that's a whole other thing altogether. But frankly, the minute that you start to choose one, you're excluding another. There are people who don't celebrate anything. So how do you celebrate the atheists, right? For me, it's not our role, it's not our job. What we do need is we need information so that we can plan our events accordingly. So if we can separate out the clause, I think it's the second clause, for a separate vote, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you also want to, on the third clause, communicating with the public and celebrating our diverse faith and cultures?
I think at this point, the one that I have a real issue with is utilizing our town communications channels. We all communicate with our residents. I'd like to know when it's Chinese New Year so that I can wish my constituents a happy Chinese New Year. But unless I have this information, I can't do that. So it is an important tool. I'm not trying to be obstructionist. I'm really just trying to rectify or ratify that piece of me that says we are a secular organization, and the minute we start to celebrate one, we're excluding others. So individually, we all have an obligation to recognize and celebrate our diverse community here and all of the new folks that are here and all of those wonderful practices and traditions that they bring with them. But is it our job in communications to be sending out religious messages? That's where I have a challenge.
So you're wanting to separate out the second clause and leave 1, 3, and 4 in place. Okay. Councillor Carruthers.
I don't believe it's a religious message to wish someone happy holidays, whether it is your chosen holiday, the majority of the town's chosen holiday, or someone's specific holiday. And I think that wishing people happy holidays is not a non-secular thing to do. I think it is what we do all the time when we wish people Merry Christmas. I think it is what we do when we have a Halloween hike. All of these things are celebrated by some and not by others. But wishing people happy holidays in their own holiday, whether it's Chinese New Year, Yom Kippur, Easter, that is inclusion. That is, I don't appreciate it being framed as excluding atheists. No, when you include people, you're opening the door for everyone. And I think that it's long overdue that our town move from just wishing Merry Christmas to people to wishing happy holidays to people of all faiths in the faith that they choose. The school board is also a secular organization. They have all kinds of inclusivity strategies to make sure that everyone feels included. We are not sending out religious messages by wishing someone happy holidays.
Councillor Morton.
I believe that this council started some time ago removing Merry Christmas from things that we did here. It's not called the Christmas tree anymore. It's not called other Merry Christmas. It's not this, it's not that. It's Happy Holidays now. So from what I'm seeing is it's not the fact that we have our own celebrations by saying Merry Christmas in our own homes or our families or whatever we have. We're saying Happy Holidays to everybody. That's how it's reacted now. It's here. It's already here. So I don't think that us having to do special things for different nationalities. I think that what we're doing now by saying Happy Holidays, we're already there. And I'm not sure that we're saying to staff, we have to go out there and you have to make sure that everybody knows about this. Because we are doing that ourselves already.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Crone.
I'll tread into this with trepidation.
I fully appreciate this being in the middle of my two colleagues on either side of me.
both love.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you. I think we have general consensus on the first part, where we all want to be cognizant of all the holidays out there, so we can plan accordingly, because we want to have the best turnout event for any events that we do. So I think there's general agreement in that. I think the other part, which is where we're struggling, I would suggest we table that and have a discussion in the future, because I think we need a more fulsome debate on that, because there are, we participate in a Santa Claus parade. We do put out advertisements at Christmas time. We say Happy Holidays or Season's Greetings, but it's at the time of Christmas and Hanukkah. So, I think we have to be balanced in what we do. Anyway, my suggestion is, I think we vote for the part that we all have an agreement in, and then maybe have a separate discussion, a more fulsome discussion at another meeting, so that we can have, everyone can really have some time to think about it and reflect, and then come to the next meeting with a little more facts and wisdom behind them. My 2 cents.
Thank you. Councillor Persechini?
Just a question. What is this all come from? It's not broken. Why fix it? I mean, why do we get into this in the first place? I mean, this is, I don't know. If we've been carrying on all these years, what brought this up in the first place? If someone told me, I would appreciate it.
I'll take a stab at it. I think that as our communities change and we have new people moving into our community, we want to respect their culture as they respect ours. I believe that's why we have this calendar.
I think we're all saying the same thing. Just as how we'll go about it, I guess. Then we'll have to wait until we talk about it more.
Thank you. So, go ahead.
I would like to bring someone from the Diversity and Inclusion Committee here to maybe make a presentation at a future meeting that talks about why they felt that this is necessary, because this is a recommendation from the committee. So I'm trying my best to make the points for them, but I think hearing it in their own words, a presentation on why we should say Merry Christmas and why we should say Happy Hanukkah and all the other holidays. I'm not a Raptors fan, but we used town resources to put out a message about the Raptors winning. And I don't have a problem with that. So the same way I wouldn't have a problem if it's Chinese New Year and we put out something saying Happy Chinese New Year. So that's what this is about. It's about widening the things that we're already celebrating to include more people in our community, to make more of them feel welcome here by putting out messages but the things that they're celebrating, just not the things that are exclusive to the people in this chamber, but to look beyond that. So I would love to have, I don't know if we need a motion to invite the Diversity and Inclusion Committee to come forward and make a presentation of the calendar and what their advice is on to council with respect to how to use it.
At this point, I have a motion on the floor from Councillor Carruthers, including all points that have been written. And so at this point, I have other suggestions, but I need to deal with the motion on the floor at first. So Councillor Carruthers, what would you like? Having heard this discussion, what is your desire for this motion?
Right now, it does say to present back to the committee. So often that's just in a report, but I think that we can work into that it's actually a live presentation, that they would come and actually speak to it. So I think that is included. And so maybe we can roll those two in together. The one that Councillor Roy Clemente has an issue with about using communication channels to recognize holidays. Maybe we can, Mr. Clerk, if you can help us with that. I'm hoping that we can get Councillor Roy DeClemente's approval if that is not a de facto that the communications department will do that, but instead that the committee come back and present on that. Would that work with you, Councillor Roy DeClemente?
Go ahead.
I believe the motion on the floor has 4 clauses. And if we can, I think in the interest of moving this forward and wrapping this meeting up, if we simply vote on each of those clauses separately, that would get us to where we need to go. I did want to make another thought, or it was a moment that for me, it's not just about, I think we're confusing the issues of faith and culture. And I think that those are 2 things that we need to be, are an important distinction between what is a cultural celebration and what is a faith-based celebration. And I think for me, that's an important distinction. But in the interest of moving us forward, if we could simply, we've got the motion on the floor, vote on each of those clauses separately, and then we can have the committee come back to us, and whether they're presenting it in written form or through a presentation, I think that's a great idea. Thank you.
So we will go through each one, 1 to 4. I've numbered them on my agenda, and I'm seeing nodding here as we move forward. So this is a motion moved by Councillor Carruthers, and the first motion, want me to read it out, or are people able to? Number 1, all those in favor? That carries. Number 2, all those in favor? That does not carry. Not in committee, we can in council.
Right.
Okay, so that does not pass. Section number 3, all those in favor? That carries. And the last clause, number 4, all those in favor? And that carries. Okay, I think we've sorted it out. Thank you, staff. Is there any other business at this time? Workshop topics. Mr. Webster.
Madam Mayor, the workshop topics, we've had a number this calendar year as directed by council. We are moving, as the treasurer stated, into the budget cycle with some presentations and that. So the thoughts being, I conferred with the clerk beforehand, we have workshops set aside for mid-January and mid-February 2020. And staff would like to propose that we utilize those dates for planned workshop discussion sessions. And at this time, we're proposing that the December 10th, 2019 session just be held in case it might be required for budget discussions. So we would not necessarily be having a topic at that time.
I believe calendars are very full from staff and from members of council. Leading into our budget deliberations starting next week. I would hope that we would have this available as you've suggested, should we need further time rather than covering some topics that perhaps could be waiting until January or later. Not seeing any other. Could I have a motion to adjourn? Councillor Crone at 3:14. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. And so we will